After my daughter-in-law stood in front of 200 people and said, "She's old, confused, and living in the past, don't listen to her," I swallowed my pride in silence. But while she campaigned for power, I went door to door with my late husband's journal, a box of forged documents, and a list of people she thought would stay loyal. The night she lost the election by 11 votes, she didn't know I was the 11th. I didn't raise my hand. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew if I did, if I slapped her right there in the middle of that crowded church hall, I'd lose everything, my dignity, my grandchildren, the fragile piece of my late husband's name. So I stood still. My daughter-in-law, Maya Varma, stood at the podium with that smug, practiced smile. She held the microphone like a sword, and her voice sliced through the tension in the room like a blade through ripe fruit. "Mrs. Rawat," she said loudly, the crowd now hushed, "we all heard your version. But let's be honest, you've always had trouble separating fact from fiction." The room rippled with awkward chuckles. I watched the head of the housing society turn away to hide his grin. I saw the principal of St. Dominic's school glance nervously at his shoes. I felt my knees tremble. Not from fear. From fury. She didn't just challenge my memory. She questioned my integrity, my sanity. And the worst part? My son, Arjun, sat silently beside her, adjusting his collar, as if the heat in the room came from broken air conditioning and not betrayal. I walked out. No shouting. No rebuttal. Just silence. But that silence wasn't surrender. What Maya didn't know, what no one knew, was that I wasn't alone. There are two kinds of people in every neighborhood, those who speak at the mic, and those who know where the wires run behind the walls. I was the latter. So while Maya prepared for her re-election as ward councillor, I started making quiet visits, one house at a time. I brought tea. I brought memories. I brought truths. And little by little, people remembered things they had forgotten, or chosen to forget. Like how Maya had manipulated parking permits to benefit her friend's business. Or how the new playground fund somehow never led to a new swing set. Or how Mr. Suresh, a 74-year-old ex-army man, was fined for illegal tree pruning after he questioned her proposed market rezoning. I started with stories. Then I handed out copies of receipts, permits, and council minutes. I showed them patterns. I showed them motives. I didn't accuse. I asked questions. And questions, I've learned, can destroy empires faster than swords. The whispers grew. What was once a tight ship began to leak. By the time Maya noticed, it was too late. Her campaign was built on polished speeches and power lunches. Mine was built on dinner tables, tiffin boxes, and silent nods from people who never raised their voices but voted in numbers. She laughed it off at first. Then she panicked. And when she lost by 11 votes, she didn't even show up to the results announcement. But I did. Not to gloat. To reclaim my family's honor. She thought she'd destroyed my name. But all she did was wake up the wrong grandmother. To everyone listening right now, thank you for staying till the end of chapter 1. I want to know, where are you from? Drop it in the comments. If this story gripped you even a little, hit that like button, share it with someone who loves suspense, and subscribe so you don't miss chapter 2, because the story is just getting started. Next time, we meet the man who knew too much, and said too little. The day after Maya Varma lost the election, the neighborhood was silent in a strange way. Not the silence of peace. The silence of disbelief. Confusion. And a whisper that something had shifted. Not just in the power structure, but in the stories people told about themselves, to themselves. I stood at my window sipping tea that had long gone cold, watching a pigeon hop awkwardly across the boundary wall. My heart should have felt triumphant, but instead, it buzzed with the uneasy feeling that something wasn't over. And I was right. 3 knocks. Then a pause. Then 2 more. I knew that knock. It hadn't changed in 30 years. I opened the door to find Mr. Fahim Ansari standing there. Lean. Reserved. Eyes like broken glass, quiet but sharp. He had served on the Residence Audit Committee back when my late husband was president of the Neighborhood Trust. Now, at 69, he walked like a man carrying a secret in each step. "I heard she lost," he said, stepping in without waiting to be invited. "Congratulations. But also, be careful." He placed a thin folder on my dining table. "She's not the only one who's been hiding things." Inside the folder were 6 documents. Property transfer records. Digital payment trails. And something that made my breath hitch, a forged land use certificate bearing my husband's old signature. "I don't understand," I said, even though a part of me already did. Fahim tapped the paper gently, not looking up. "She's been using your husband's name to legalize land deals. Some of them on government land. Fake allotments, ghost tenants, redevelopment bribes. And these weren't for her benefit only. She's got a silent backer. Powerful. Local. Someone who never shows up in pictures." I sat down slowly. "What do you want from me?" Fahim finally looked up. "I want you to listen. That's all. And then decide how far you're willing to go." He started telling me things I wish I'd never heard. About the disappeared minutes from the 2019 zoning meeting. About the 3-acre plot near the drainage canal that was sold to a shell company based in Chandigarh. About how Maya's rise to power wasn't just political, it was engineered. And the worst part? My son Arjun might have signed 2 of the deals. I felt the room shift under my feet. As if the floor wasn't made of tiles, but of sand slipping through fingers. Fahim pushed a USB drive toward me. "This has names. Dates. Audio recordings. One of them might be your son's voice." "I haven't opened it." "You should." "I didn't touch it." "I thought you said you wanted nothing." He paused, stood, and headed toward the door. "I said I wanted nothing from you. But if you're going to keep digging graves, you better know how deep they go." That night, I sat alone in the kitchen listening to the humming of the fridge and the occasional hiss of the overhead light. I didn't sleep. I listened to the first audio file at 1:43 a.m. A voice said, "It's her land on paper. But the money trail ends with Malik." Then another voice, shaky, younger, but familiar. "So what do I sign?" My fingers clenched. I couldn't be sure it was Arjun. But I also couldn't be sure it wasn't. Here's the thing, when you go after someone powerful, they fall with noise. Drama. Headlines. But when you stumble on someone dangerous, they don't fall. They pull you in. By the time you realize it, you're not chasing justice anymore. You're surviving it. And the strange thing? After years of being ignored, humiliated, and underestimated, I finally felt something else stir in me. Not just fury. Not just revenge. But resolve. This wasn't just about Maya anymore. This was about the truth my husband died never telling me. This was about my son. This was about cleaning the rot, not just replacing the fruit. Because the tree itself was poisoned. And now, I had no choice but to dig into its roots. There's a room in our neighborhood no one visits unless they have to. It smells of mothballs, dust, and paper older than most of the people living here. The community archive room, buried in the back wing of the local library, is a place where old permits go to die, and forgotten letters wait to be remembered. I hadn't stepped into that room since my husband's passing. But after what Fahim told me, and after hearing that voice in the audio file, possibly Arjun's, I needed answers. Real ones. Not whispered theories or hollow suspicions. Something concrete. The librarian, an old woman named Mrs. D'Souza, blinked when she saw me. "Haven't seen you since he left us." I nodded. Her hand briefly rested on mine. No words. Just shared history. Then she quietly unlocked the back room and left me alone. The air was thick with neglect. Stacks of documents, housing blueprints, council meeting transcripts, society newsletters, all arranged in numbered steel drawers that hadn't been cleaned since the late 90s. I started with the land use files from 2017 to 2020. The years when Maya had grown the fastest, and Arjun had slowly started avoiding eye contact at dinner. 2 hours passed. My eyes burned. My back ached. Nothing useful. Then I opened drawer 26B, inside were 2 bound files marked unsorted. I flipped them open lazily, expecting the usual, more permits, more mundane signatures. But in the middle of the second bundle, stuffed between pages like someone tried to hide it in plain sight, was a thick envelope. Yellowed. No name. No return address. Just one word, scrawled in blue ink, confess. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside were a faded photograph of Maya, smiling beside a man who was not my son, not her father, not anyone I recognized, but he was holding a blueprint. A forged council seal on a redevelopment proposal that had supposedly been denied in 2018, but had obviously gone through under different terms. And then, what truly turned my blood cold, a typed and signed letter, dated March 12, 2019, addressed to someone only as M, detailing a payment of 18 Indian rupees lakhs in cash to a third party named Malik, with instructions to route it via a community trust account registered under my husband's name. No signature. No sender. But there was a post-it attached to the last page, with just 3 words handwritten on it, check ledger 14. I moved like I was in a dream. The ledger files were heavy, but I found the one labeled 14. Inside was a handwritten note by my late husband, his unmistakable slanted handwriting. Delayed but cleared. Fund redirected per instructions. S.R. S.R. My husband, Sham Rawat. I had spent years defending his name. Now, was it possible he was part of this? Or worse, had they used his name after he died? Was Arjun covering for Maya, or for his own father's legacy? I left the library with the envelope sealed again. My fingers shook. My mind raced. That night, I called Fahim. Told him what I'd found. He didn't say a word for nearly 30 seconds. Then he said something I'll never forget. You're not just fighting for justice anymore. You're walking through fire with matches in your pocket. Be careful who you hand one to. I knew now that this wasn't about taking Maya down. It was about exposing everything the neighborhood had forgotten, or chosen to ignore. But to do that, I needed to find Malik. And I needed to decide whether to protect Arjun, or uncover whatever secrets my husband had taken to his grave. The first time I heard the name Malik, I was 16. He was a blurry figure then, someone my uncle spoke about only in whispers, always followed by silence or prayer. Back then, Malik was just a fixer. A nobody who made things happen for people who didn't want to wait. Permits. Land titles. Bribes delivered with rosewater and smiles. Now, decades later, his name surfaced again, but this time, it came attached to a trail that led directly to my family's doorstep. And I was finally ready to follow it. On Sunday morning, I walked to the Hanuman temple at the edge of Sector 9. Not because I was particularly devout that day, but because I had received an anonymous tip the night before. A typed note slid under my door, "You want Malik?" 7:45 a.m. Temple steps. He'll never come to you. You'll have to offer him something he needs. Something bigger than silence. It wasn't signed. But the envelope had a faint scent, bitter. Expensive. Sharp. Only one person I knew wore that scent. Neela Suri. My oldest friend. A woman who had once cried beside me when Arjun was born. And someone who, according to Fahim, had served as Maya's unofficial campaign advisor for 2 years. I reached the temple early. Wore a shawl. Waited. Counted the cracks in the marble steps. At exactly 7:47, a black car pulled up. Not flashy. Not loud. A driver in uniform stepped out, opened the back door, and a man emerged. Not tall. Not young. But watchful. His eyes scanned the street like someone used to being followed. He didn't walk like a criminal. He walked like a man who had nothing left to prove. He sat 3 steps above me. Didn't look at me. Didn't greet me. He simply said, "If this is about your husband, you're 26 months too late." My heart pounded. "I'm not here to clear his name," I said. "I'm here to find out who buried it." That made him look at me. He studied my face as if measuring my limits. "You think Maya was the queen? She wasn't even the rook. Just a piece. And you're still playing checkers while we've already finished the game." I showed him the envelope. The blueprint photo. The unsigned letter. He didn't flinch. Just leaned in slightly and said, "You're brave. But bravery makes people dangerous. Especially people like Neela." My stomach turned. "She's feeding you half the truth," he continued. "Just enough to keep your blood hot and your hands busy. But ask yourself, why now? Why not 4 years ago?" I wanted to argue. But I couldn't. Because deep down, I'd started to suspect the same. Then he said something I wasn't ready for. "Your husband didn't sign the final approval. He refused. So we used your son." The world tilted. "No. Arjun didn't." Malik raised a hand. Calm. Clinical. He didn't know the full picture. We never told him. We gave him a legal doc, told him it was a routine transfer. He trusted Maya. Maya trusted us. He stood. Wiped invisible dust off his trousers. "You want the rest of the story? Talk to Neela. But be careful how you ask. Everyone has a secret. Hers just hasn't surfaced, yet." Then he left. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in months. I invited Neela over for tea. She arrived smiling, wrapped in a silk sari and that same strong Atari scent. We talked about small things. The weather. Arthritis. The missing cat on 5th Avenue. Then I placed the envelope on the table. Her smile didn't falter. But her fingers clenched around her teacup. "I met Malik," I said quietly. "He said I should ask you what the full picture looks like." There was a long pause. And then she whispered, as if speaking hurt, "You think you're the only one who was betrayed?" Neela didn't speak for a long time. Her hands trembled slightly, the way they used to when she was about to lie, but this time, it wasn't a lie coming. It was something heavier. Something long buried that had finally started to rot. She took a slow sip of her tea, set the cup down gently, and said, "You think Maya's ambition started all this?" "No. It started long before her. Before Arjun. Before even you and me." I leaned forward. "Then start there." 1995, that was the year, she said, that Malik first began showing up around our community. Back then, he wasn't a kingmaker, just a broker with deep political ties and a knack for creating problems before he offered solutions. He used to visit her husband, Ajay, a contractor with several stalled government projects. Neela's voice dropped. Ajay owed him money. A lot. When he couldn't pay, Malik made him sign off on a redevelopment plan using fake community consent forms. One of those forged signatures. She paused. "Your husband's." My breath caught. "That can't be true. Sham would never." "I know," she said, eyes welling. "He found out. Confronted Ajay. Threatened to expose him at the next society meeting." "So what happened?" She looked straight at me. "The fire. August 2nd, 1995. I remembered the date now that she said it. A fire had broken out in the municipal storage office across town. Small article. Page 6 of the newspaper. Just a handful of files lost, the report said. No injuries. But what Neela told me that evening cracked the timeline wide open. That fire wasn't random. It was a cleanup. And one of the files burned in it? The original redevelopment proposal, the one bearing my husband's name, used without his consent. Neela wiped a tear and looked away. Sham didn't tell you. He thought if he stayed quiet, it would die with that file. But Malik never forgets a favor. Or a threat. I stood up. The room felt suddenly too tight, too warm. Why didn't you tell me this before? I asked. She gave me a look that hurt more than anger ever could. Because you had a family to protect. And I had one to keep from collapsing. I should have screamed. Accused her. Walked her out of my house. But I didn't. Because in that moment, I understood something far more terrifying. This wasn't a story about one lie. It was a web of decades-old compromises, where truth was currency, and silence was survival. And now, I had pulled too many threads to stop. That night, I climbed to the rooftop for air. The city lights flickered. Somewhere, a scooter engine buzzed down an alley. Familiar sounds. A familiar world. But I couldn't sleep. Something in Neela's story didn't sit right. Too neat. Too convenient. Why confess now? Why protect Malik in one breath, then blame him in the next? I found myself drawn to the old water tank, rusted and humming with echo. Behind it, wrapped in plastic, wedged between bricks, I found something I didn't know I was looking for. A journal. My husband's handwriting. Faint. Tight. Rambling. I opened the first page. If you're reading this, then I never got to explain. There are things I was forced to sign. And things I never did, but they said I did. This isn't just about land. It's about power. And it always has been. I didn't read the whole journal that night. I couldn't. Some pages were stuck together by moisture, others blurred by time and ink that had bled through with age. But what I did manage to read changed everything I thought I knew, not just about my husband, but about the quiet war that had been festering beneath our community for decades. Malik offered me 3 options. One entry said, sign. Stay silent. Or pay, with more than money. Sham hadn't just been pressured. He'd been trapped. Threats had come dressed as friendly advice. And Maya? She was just a schoolteacher's daughter then, not yet my daughter-in-law. Yet her name came up, more than once. Maya's sharp, he'd written. Too sharp. She asked questions no intern should be asking. I don't know who she's working for yet, but she's watching everything. She had been circling this web long before Arjun even noticed her. And my son? According to another entry, Sham had tried to warn him, quietly, without spooking him. But Arjun hadn't listened. Or worse, he hadn't cared. I was still on the rooftop, hunched over that fragile journal, when I heard it. The click of the gate. Not loud. Just soft enough to make me freeze. I leaned over the edge. A figure, tall, moving quickly, approached the side door of my home. I crept down the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. No light. No sound. Just the echo of each step, the old wood under my feet betraying me. Then, metal on metal. The side lock. I picked up the rusted iron rod near the flower pots. Held it like I used to hold Arjun's cricket bat when he was a boy and had nightmares. The door creaked. And then, silence. I flung the door open, swinging the rod blindly. But no one was there. Just the smell of sweat. The faint shape of a boot print on the tile. And next to the wall, an envelope. This one wasn't yellowed. It was crisp. Clean. White. No name. But this time, there was a return stamp. From Ghaziabad. I took it upstairs and opened it with shaking hands. Inside were 2 photographs. One of Arjun. Recent. He was standing outside an unfamiliar building, speaking to a woman I didn't recognize. And another, this one older. My husband, seated across from Malik. Both men unaware they were being photographed. Under the photos, a note. You think you're finding answers. But all you're doing is reopening graves. Some truths are meant to stay buried, Maji. Stop digging. Or someone else will be buried next. My hands went cold. Who took those photos? Who knew I'd found the journal? And why leave a threat when they could have just destroyed the evidence? Unless they were trying to scare me, not stop me. Not yet. That meant I still had something they didn't. Something they were afraid of. I took the journal, the envelope, and the photographs, and locked them inside my Old Spice tin. Then I made 3 phone calls. One to Fahim. One to Neela. And one to a reporter I hadn't spoken to in 10 years, Ria Das, the only journalist who ever refused to print Maya's press releases without verifying her numbers. Because now, I needed something more than whispers. I needed witnesses. They arrived one by one. First Fahim, then Neela, and finally, just as dusk swallowed the streetlights, Ria Das, the journalist. Each of them brought something with them. Fahim brought quiet urgency, Neela brought guilt disguised as grace, and Ria, she brought a battered leather satchel and the sharp eyes of someone who had survived too many truths. We didn't speak right away. I served tea, as I always did, and watched them watch each other. A war room disguised as a sitting room. 4 chairs. 3 secrets. 1 bomb waiting to go off. I slid the envelope across the table. Then the photographs. Then my husband's journal. Fahim went pale the moment he saw the picture of Sham with Malik. He leaned forward, whispered, "Where did you get this?" "The roof," I said simply. "Behind the water tank. Where he used to hide the last packet of cigarettes he pretended to have quit." Neela didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her eyes did the talking, eyes that darted to the photo of Arjun and the unknown woman. She blinked once. Slowly. She knew something. But it was Ria who spoke first. "This picture has no timestamp." She held up the photo of Sham and Malik. No metadata. No print markings. No photographer's signature. Which means it was either taken with a surveillance camera, or by someone who wanted it to disappear. Then she reached into her satchel and pulled out something unexpected, a file folder labeled Case 014, M. Verma. My stomach twisted. "I started tracking Maya 3 years ago," Ria said. "Every time she got involved with a housing project, someone got displaced. And every time someone filed a complaint, someone else got a promotion. But the real story? I never had names. Just shadows. Until now." She tapped the envelope again. "This is not just proof. It's bait. Someone wants you to burn it. Or use it recklessly. Either way, it benefits them." Fahim cleared his throat. "I know who forged the land transfer," he said. We all froze. Not the first one. The last one. The one that tied Arjun's name to the playground redevelopment. The one that made him legally liable. "Who?" I asked. He looked at Neela. And she looked away. "No," I whispered. "You didn't." Neela's voice broke before it even began. "I didn't know it would stick. I was told it was temporary. A placeholder, just to move things along." "Who told you?" She didn't answer. Because she didn't need to. We all knew the answer. Maya. But something else happened then, something even stranger. Ria pulled out a USB stick and plugged it into her tablet. "I want you to see this," she said. A month before the election, Maya visited a property registrar's office in Ghaziabad. Security cameras caught this footage. She played the clip. Maya, walking briskly. Alone. She hands a file to the clerk. He stamps it without reading. Ria paused the video. Zoomed in. The name on the file? Rawat Community Property Dispute Settlement, final. But here's what stopped my heart. The timestamp was the day after Sham's death. He'd been gone for 23 hours. And someone had already used his name to settle a land dispute he never even mentioned to me. Ria looked up. Your husband's name was used posthumously. Illegally. The seal on that file? Only one person had access to it at the time. She turned to Fahim. His face was unreadable. Then he whispered, the seal was kept in the audit office. My office. For a second, no one breathed. Then I said what no one else would. You knew. Fahim nodded once. I suspected. I didn't know it went this far. Ria stood, her voice calm but firm. We don't have weeks. Someone's already trying to cover their tracks. Whoever left that envelope at your home, they want this buried their way. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, everything looked normal. Children riding bicycles. Someone shouting about fresh vegetables. A dog barking at a passing rickshaw. But inside my home, a war was brewing. And I was no longer just a victim. I was becoming something else entirely. A witness. A threat. A weapon. There's a particular kind of silence that comes after betrayal, not the silence of peace, but of shifting earth. Of something foundational cracking under your feet while the walls still pretend to stand tall. That was the silence in my home after Ria left. Fahim stayed behind. Neela didn't. She made an excuse, said she had a prayer meeting, and slipped out, clutching her shawl tighter than necessary. I didn't stop her. I didn't need to. Her truth was already dripping through the seams. That night, I went into Sham's study, the room we'd converted into a storage space after his death. Boxes of files, old letters, dusty awards, and that massive steel cabinet we never managed to empty. Ria had asked a question before she left. If that land dispute was settled posthumously, where's the matching ledger entry? Every transaction done under a registered housing trust had to be logged. That was rule number 1. And my husband, he was many things, but sloppy wasn't one of them. If that land deal happened legally, a matching ledger entry had to exist. And if it didn't? Then someone was rewriting history with stolen ink. I spent the next 4 hours digging through every ledger in the cabinet. 2016, 2017, 2018, nothing. 2019, the year Sham died. Still nothing. No entry. No signature. No mention of the Ghaziabad property or the disputed redevelopment. Then I found something strange. A gap. A physical one. Between 2 ledger books, 2018 and a mislabeled 2020, was an empty space. Not just a missing ledger. An entire missing year. A slip of paper was jammed at the back of the shelf. Torn. Crumpled. Probably shoved there by accident. One word was scribbled on it in black ink, burnt. That was the moment I remembered something Neela said in Chapter 5. The fire in 1995 wasn't random. It was a cleanup. Could there have been another fire? A small one. Contained. Never reported. Inside our own trust office? I grabbed my phone. Called Fahim. No answer. Called again. Still nothing. Then my phone buzzed, a new number. I answered. Silence. And then, a woman's voice. Calm. Measured. Controlled. Maji, how many ghosts are you willing to disturb to protect the name of a man who's already dead? Maya. Why are you calling me? I asked, keeping my voice flat. You've done well, she said. Better than I expected. But the game's about to change. You're too visible now. I said nothing. Then she added, with an eerie softness, ask Fahim about October 14th. Ask him where he was. Ask him why the CCTV was offline that day. The line went dead. I called Fahim again. This time, he picked up. His voice was ragged. You spoke to her? She says you know what happened on October 14th. That the CCTV was offline. That a ledger disappeared. Silence. Then he whispered, I didn't know they'd go that far. What happened, Fahim? I came into the office late that day. Around 3 p.m. The back room smelled of smoke. I saw scorch marks near the cabinet. They told me a small electrical fire broke out and they'd already disposed of the damaged file. Just one ledger, they said. One. I nearly dropped the phone. Who told you that? Arjun. The name punched through my chest. He was there? I asked, barely breathing. Yes. He said he'd come by to collect some papers. Said he found the smoldering file and put the fire out. And you believed him? He's your son, Fahim said, weakly. He wouldn't. I hung up. Because I didn't need to hear the rest. Because the truth was already clawing its way up from the pit in my stomach. At 11:47 p.m, I knocked on Arjun's door. He opened it. Hair messy. Eyes tired. He didn't speak. Just stepped aside and let me in. I placed the photo of him and the unknown woman on his dining table. Tell me who she is, I said. He sat down. Rubbed his temples. She's a lawyer, he said. She handles Malik's paperwork. Why were you meeting her? A pause. I was trying to protect you. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was such a child's answer. You helped destroy a ledger, Arjun. His eyes went wide. I didn't, you knew what was in it. Or at least you knew it needed to vanish. He looked away. Said nothing. So I asked the one question I never thought I'd need to. Did your father know? His answer came like a slow leak from a pipe already cracked. He suspected. But he died before I could tell him everything. I stood there, watching my son, torn between guilt and cowardice, crushed under the weight of a name he didn't earn and a mess he helped bury. And I knew this story had just shifted again. Because now? I didn't know if I was trying to save Arjun. Or expose him. The lights went out at 2:12 a.m. Not just a flicker. A total blackout. The kind that makes your heart jump and your breath go shallow, not because of the dark itself, but because of what it might be hiding. I was in the kitchen when it happened, halfway through rereading a page of Sham's journal. I had circled a few phrases earlier that evening, trying to piece together the pattern. Something about alternate signatures and proxy designations. I hadn't understood it until now. When the power cut, I froze. Not from fear. From recognition. Because 2 hours earlier, Fahim had warned me on a text, if someone tampers with the trust office again, the backup system will cut all external power for 30 minutes. Safety protocol from 2006. Only 3 people know that. 3 people. Fahim. Sham. And Maya. I lit a candle and made my way to the cabinet. The air felt dense, like the night itself was holding its breath. I unlocked the spice tin, took out the journal, and slowly peeled open one of the back pages I'd skipped before, partly because the ink was smeared, but mostly because the handwriting looked slightly off. Too clean. Too uniform. Not Sham's hurried, slanted letters. This page was practiced. I held it up beside another page. And that's when I saw it. The loops were wrong. The R was wrong. The date was wrong. Sham didn't write this. But someone wanted me to think he did. The page said, proxy assigned. Final signature under supervision. Malik approved. Ledger cross-filed. At the bottom, S.R. My husband's initials. Only, not in his hand. Which meant this wasn't just a forged document. It was a planted confession. And it had been sitting inside his journal, hidden, but not hidden enough, for years. A chill slid down my spine. Because if someone went to the trouble of planting this page, they wanted me to find it. And if they wanted me to find it, they were controlling the narrative even now. The power returned at exactly 2:42 a.m. I rushed to my phone. Called Ria. Straight to voicemail. Tried again. Nothing. I messaged her, Ria, something's wrong. The journal's been tampered with. The blackout, it wasn't random. No reply. I called Fahim. He picked up on the third ring. Power's back, I said. He sighed. I know. I was watching. Watching what? He hesitated. The office. I went back tonight. Something told me someone would try to access the files. I saw a man near the back window just before the lights went out. Who? I don't know. But he was carrying something. What? A box. Small. Metal. Looked like a tape recorder. That stopped me cold. Because back in chapter 2, Fahim had given me a USB. He said there were recordings, some of them possibly with Arjun's voice. I hadn't listened to all of them yet. But now, I realized, if someone had those original tapes, they could control what evidence survived, and what conveniently disappeared. And then Fahim said something that made my blood run cold. The man I saw wasn't a stranger, Mrs. Rawat. He walked with a limp. Just like Ria. I dropped the phone. Ria. The one person I thought I could trust. The one person who had been gathering information too efficiently, always arriving just in time to move the story along, but never getting burned by it. Was she helping me? Or steering me? And what if the woman in the photo with Arjun wasn't just a lawyer? What if she was a fixer? The page in the journal. The missing ledger. The altered recording. And now a blackout. This wasn't just damage control. Someone was rewriting the past in real time. The lie wasn't in what they said. It was in what they never talked about. March 2019. My husband, Sham Rawat, disappeared for 3 days. We told everyone it was a spiritual retreat. That he'd left his phone behind for peace of mind, that he was meditating in the hills near Haridwar. But the truth? He left without a word. No note. No bag. No destination. And when he came back, he was different. He was quieter. Paranoid. He double-locked the house at night, started burning papers instead of shredding them, and he took to writing in his journal obsessively, but not in front of me. At the time, I convinced myself that grief had changed him. His brother had passed, his old friends were moving away, and politics in our colony were turning uglier by the day. But now, with everything unraveling, Maya, Malik, the forged page in his journal, I knew better. Something happened during those 3 days. And someone knew what. I started digging. The local retreat center in Haridwar had no record of Sham ever signing in that week. No payment slips. No photographs. Not even a phone ping in the area. But the day after he returned, he visited Bridgelock Hospital, a private clinic outside Ghaziabad. He said he went there for a blood pressure check. But the hospital's name was too specific, too far off his usual routine to ignore. I called them. Pretended to be updating medical records for insurance purposes. They hesitated, then gave me a partial record. March 14, 2019. Patient, Sham Rawat Department, neurology visit type, private consultation diagnosis, not applicable, patient declined to disclose prior history duration, 23 minutes doctor on duty, Dr. R. K. Mehra. The next morning, I showed up at Bridgelock Hospital without calling. The receptionist was new. Didn't know me. Good. But Dr. Mehra? Gone. Transferred last year to a private wellness facility in Dehradun. Too clean. Too convenient. I asked for the consultation notes. They said there were none. Burnt records. Missing ledgers. Now, missing doctors. I was beginning to see the pattern. Everyone who touched the truth either vanished, or was made to. But I wasn't alone. As I walked out of the hospital gates, someone called my name. Mrs. Rawat? I turned. A woman in her 60s stood under the shade of the neem tree, ringing her dupatta with trembling fingers. She introduced herself quietly. Saroj. I used to be the ward clerk. I remember your husband. I blinked. You were here that day? She nodded. Her eyes darted around, cautious. He came in the back door. Was escorted directly to Dr. Mehra's office. No paperwork. No waiting. That never happens. Do you know why he was here? Saroj hesitated. Then whispered. He kept saying one sentence over and over when he walked in. Not to me. To himself. If I don't sign, they'll use my son. My knees went weak. Are you sure? She nodded. I never forgot. He looked broken. Not scared. Just finished. I gave her my number. Told her if she remembered anything else, anything at all, to call me. Then I walked the full kilometer back to the train station. Because I needed to think. And because now, I finally knew when the choice had been made. Sham didn't sell out. He held out, for as long as he could. And when the pressure became unbearable, he made the one trade no parent should have to make, his integrity, for Arjun's protection. That night, I confronted Arjun again. This time, I didn't ask questions. I gave him the hospital slip. Told him about Saroj. Told him about the forged journal page and the blackout. And I watched the last of his denials dissolve. I didn't know they threatened him, he whispered. I thought he was just sick. I didn't know he was covering for me. You weren't the one being protected, I said. You were the weapon. I used to believe grief had stages: shock, denial, anger, bargaining, acceptance. But no one tells you there's a sixth stage. The one that comes long after you've accepted the loss, after the tears, after the silence. The one where you realize your grief was based on a lie, and the person you buried was fighting a war you never knew existed. That was the stage I had now entered. And I wasn't grieving anymore. I was preparing for war. It began with a knock on my door. A delivery man. Helmet still on. No eye contact. He handed me an envelope and walked off without a word. Inside was a document, a draft of Neela Suri's will. Dated 6 months ago. I shouldn't have received it. But I recognized the seal on the bottom right corner: Chaudhary and Associates, Family Law, the same firm Neela's late husband used for their estate planning. There was only one name listed as beneficiary: Maya Varma. No children. No blood relatives. Everything, Neela's ancestral home, her shares in the trust, and her private gold assets, was to be transferred to Maya. A woman who was not family. Who had never even been publicly acknowledged in Neela's circle. I sat down slowly. My fingers numb. Why would Neela do that? Unless this wasn't just allegiance. It was insurance. Fahim arrived 30 minutes later, breathless and rattled. I found him, he said. The man who saw Malik's face in court. What court? Bhiwani District Court. 2003, land dispute involving forged documents. The witness, an office clerk, identified Malik in the courtroom, said he was the one who submitted falsified affidavits. But then he disappeared. The case went nowhere. Who was the witness? Fahim handed me a name on a scrap of paper. Rakesh Handa. Current address, Sector 4. Apartment C, 17. Right here in our own colony. I didn't understand. He's still alive? Yes. But here's the catch. He pretends to be blind. An hour later, we were at Rakesh's apartment. A dim, quiet room. Thick curtains. The faint smell of medicine and mothballs. He sat on a plastic chair, sunglasses on, white cane beside him. But when Fahim asked about Malik, the man didn't even flinch. Never heard the name, he said. Fahim placed a 20-year-old court photograph on the table. And without touching it, Rakesh turned his head toward the image. I leaned in. You're not blind, Mr. Handa. He smiled faintly. No, I'm not. Why pretend? Because being invisible is safer than being right. Then, almost like a whisper, Malik doesn't erase enemies. He makes them forget they ever mattered. Back at home, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Silence. Then came the voice. Maya. I didn't want this to go this far, Maji. But you've forced my hand. I didn't force anything. I uncovered it. I'm willing to walk away, she said. No press. No damage to Arjun. No exposure for your husband. You get your quiet. I get mine. What do you want? One file. The USB Fahim gave you. The one with the raw recordings. I felt my stomach clench. You want it because it's proof? She laughed. No. I want it because it's the only thing that can't be altered. The rest? The papers, the photos, the signatures, all of that is deniable. But a voice? That's harder to erase. Then she said something that caught me off guard. Neela's sick. Stage 3. She made the will to protect what's left of her name. Not because she trusts me. Because she hates you. I didn't respond. You were always the voice of reason, Maya continued. The quiet conscience everyone ignored. But people like us, Maji, we don't survive by being good. We survive by being useful. Then she gave me a time. You have until Friday to deliver the USB. Or your son's voice becomes a headline. I sat there, staring at the screen after she hung up. The war was no longer silent. It had a clock now. A deadline. And a cost. There are some moments you can feel coming long before they arrive. Not because someone warns you. Not because you're ready. But because your bones tighten, your heartbeat changes, and some ancient part of your soul goes still, as if bracing. That was the moment I plugged in the USB. It had sat in my drawer for weeks. I'd avoided it like a wound I didn't want to touch. But now, with Maya's deal hanging over me, with Arjun's name at stake, with Neela's betrayal confirmed and a forged legacy threatening to consume everything Shyam left behind, it was time to listen. There were 4 audio files. 3 labeled only by dates. The 4th had no name at all. Just a timestamp, March 15, 2019, 2:34 a.m. The night Shyam returned from those missing 3 days. The night after his visit to Bridgelock Hospital. The night everything changed. I played the first file. March 10th. A recording of Maya's voice. We can route it through the trust account. He'll sign if you tell him Arjun's already implicated. Don't push too hard. Let him believe he's still choosing. My throat went dry. The second file, Fahim's voice. I don't like this. He's asking too many questions. If the ledger goes missing, and he brings it up in the next council meeting, another voice cut in, Malik. He won't. Not after the hospital. Trust me. I pressed pause. I was shaking. These weren't fragments anymore. These were weapons. I played the unnamed 4th file last. And there it was. My husband's voice. Not the tired, cautious version I remembered in his final months. But raw. Angry. And frightened. This isn't protection. This is blackmail. You tell Malik I won't sign, not even to save Arjun. If he wants the trust, let him come after me directly. I'll expose everything. A pause. Then softer. But if anything happens to my family, this recording goes public. Click. End of file. That recording was never meant to be buried. It was insurance. He knew. Sham knew. That they might force his hand, twist his loyalty, or worse, erase his legacy. So he left a message. Not for them. For me. I didn't cry. I sat still. Like a soldier reading a letter before a war. Because now, I had a decision to make. I couldn't trust the press. Couldn't trust Fahim. Couldn't even trust Neela. So I went somewhere no one expected. The old archive room at St. Agnes High School, where Sham had once volunteered to help digitize the alumni records. Buried in the back, beneath dusty banners and forgotten trophies, I found a sealed manila folder labeled, Rawat, Sham, 2019, Private Confession, Audio plus Transcript. How it got there, I don't know. Maybe it was a backup. Maybe he was more afraid than he ever let on. But it confirmed what I had only begun to suspect. Sham didn't just leave a recording, he left a map. Inside the folder, a printed transcript of the voice recording. A letter addressed to the future president of the Residence Trust. And a handwritten note that made my chest seize. If she's reading this, it means I failed. But you didn't. Keep going. S.R. I walked out of that school with shaking legs and the letter pressed to my heart. Because I understood now. Sham hadn't been defeated. He'd built a path, one only I could finish. On the surface, everything looked calm. Morning prayers. Sweeping brooms. Doorbells. Chai. Neighbors waving from balconies, pretending not to feel the tension nodding under every polite smile. But behind closed doors, battle lines were shifting. And I had just placed the first weapon on the table. That afternoon, I walked into the Residence Trust office and handed over Sham's sealed confession to the acting chairperson. The woman, Mrs. Kulkarni, blinked at it like it might explode. It's a request for an emergency vote of no confidence, with evidence attached, I said. Maya Verma misused her position. The original trust documents were manipulated. The ledger was destroyed. My husband tried to stop it, and paid the price for it. Kulkarni looked like she wanted to say no. But the seal on the envelope silenced her. The vote was scheduled for Friday evening, the same deadline Maya had given me to hand over the USB. I now had 2 ticking clocks. One public. One private. And the more dangerous one? Was my son. That night, I found Arjun standing at the balcony, looking out over the main street. His jaw was clenched, and I could tell from the subtle twitch of his hand that he was struggling. He hadn't touched food. Had barely spoken. I placed the printed transcript of Sham's final message on the table behind him and said quietly, he didn't want you to carry this guilt. But you already are. Arjun didn't turn around. When did you stop trusting him? I asked. Was it Maya? Or did you think he'd gotten too old to matter? Still no answer. So I told him what he wasn't ready to hear. You were the perfect pawn. Obedient. Tired. And desperate to feel useful. Malik didn't need your loyalty, just your signature. He flinched. And finally, he spoke. I didn't know it would go this far. I thought, she said it was just paperwork. She said Dad had already signed. That I was just reaffirming it. She lied. I know. Silence. Then I asked him the question that would shape everything. Will you speak up during the vote? He hesitated. His voice cracked. If I do, Maya will leak the recordings. My voice. My involvement. You'll lose everything. I stepped forward. We already lost everything. He nodded slowly. And in that moment, chose a side. 2 hours later, a car pulled up outside. Neela. She came alone, wearing a stiff silk sari like armor, her eyes hidden behind designer sunglasses, at night. She didn't sit when I opened the door. She didn't ask for tea. She walked straight to the drawer in the study, pulled it open, and found what she was looking for. The envelope. Her will. But she wasn't fast enough. I stepped into the room. Looking for something? She didn't even flinch. I need it back, she said. You don't understand what's at stake. I held the envelope out of reach. I understand perfectly. You're dying. And instead of cleaning up your legacy, you're handing it over to the one person who's done more harm than anyone else. Neela's voice cracked, not from emotion, but from years of denial collapsing. She's not just Maya. She's my brother's daughter. Illegitimate. Hidden. Raised in silence. I tried to keep her away from all this. But blood doesn't listen. I stared at her. The pieces clicked into place like a door I hadn't known was locked, finally opening. That's why Neela protected her. That's why she looked the other way. That's why the will existed. Maya wasn't just her protégé. She was family. Neela didn't wait for forgiveness. She simply whispered, burn it. Or use it. Either way, I'm already gone. Then she walked out. And didn't look back. That night, I sat beside Arjun as he finally listened to his father's last message, on speaker, out loud, the voice shaking both of us. No one spoke. Because there was nothing left to say. Only one thing left to do. Friday arrived with no warning, no clouds, no breeze, just the kind of still, dry air that made everything feel rehearsed. Like the neighborhood had pressed pause on real life to wait for the drama to unfold. By 6 p.m., the community hall was full. Not just full, brimming. People who hadn't attended a single trust meeting in years suddenly found time. Former presidents, retirees, college students, even two news stringers pretending to be volunteers, with notepads. They were here for the vote. But more than that, they were here for blood. And I was calm. Because I had finally stopped fighting for revenge. Now, I was fighting for memory. Arjun sat beside me, still pale, still quiet, but present. Fahim stood behind the microphone, shuffling papers with trembling hands. He wasn't built for this. But truth often forces cowards to grow spines. He opened the meeting formally, explained the purpose of the session, a vote of no confidence against Maya Verma. Backed by witness testimony, financial inconsistencies, and forged trust documents linked to a ledger that never existed. And then, he turned to me. Mrs. Rawat, he said. You may present the evidence. I stepped up. Held out the USB. And stopped cold. Because it was missing. I had triple-checked it that morning. Placed it in my purse. Zipped it. Now, it was gone. I looked at Arjun. He shook his head immediately. I swear, I didn't touch it. A slow murmur spread across the hall. People craned their necks. Some smirked. Maya, standing at the back in an emerald green salwar, folded her arms and smiled. Just slightly. I swallowed the panic. I still had the transcripts. I still had the photo evidence. I still had Sham's original sealed confession, the one no one had tampered with. I turned back to the crowd. We had a USB drive containing audio files, I said. It has gone missing. But the truth does not vanish with hardware. I held up Sham's confession. This, I took a breath. This was written by a man who believed integrity was more important than protection. Even if it cost him his legacy. His son. His life. Someone in the front row clapped once. Then twice. Then a slow ripple of applause moved across the hall, not roaring, not loud, but enough to change the energy in the room. I passed the confession to Fahim. He began to read. 10 minutes later, the vote was called. Raise your hand if you believe Maya Verma should be removed from her position, pending a formal audit and legal inquiry. Hands went up. 1 row. Then 2. Then a dozen. Then most of the room. Arjun raised his hand last. Maya didn't move. And then, I saw him. A man at the back of the room, half hidden near the sound system. Tall. Dark-skinned. Gray streak in his hair. Sunglasses. Indoors. But I recognized him from an old newspaper clipping Shyam once kept. Rakesh Handa. The man who had faked blindness to stay invisible. The man who saw Malik face to face, and lived. I moved toward him as the crowd buzzed over the result. She was ousted, effective immediately. By the time I reached the back of the hall, Rakesh was already moving through the exit. I followed him. Mr. Handa. He didn't turn. Why now? Why come tonight? He stopped. Didn't face me. Just said, because when someone like Malik disappears, you think he's dead. But when he starts showing up in people's shadows again, it means the next game has already begun. Then he walked away. That night, I returned home. Empty-handed. Exhausted. But just as I was locking the gate, I saw something tucked inside the grill. A plain envelope. Inside it, the missing USB. With a note. You win this round. But wars are rarely settled by the first fire. Be ready, Maji. The funeral happened in May, 4 years ago. Maya had arranged the cremation. Not me. Not Arjun. Not even Shyam's closest friends. She said it was his wish, to be cremated quietly, without rituals, without a gathering. I hadn't questioned it then. I was too hollow, too broken, too ashamed. Arjun had looked pale, nodding along as if someone had turned down the volume on his world. We scattered ashes Maya gave us. We lit lamps. We said nothing. Because we trusted her. Because we thought we had a body. But 2 weeks ago, while reviewing property transfer records for the residence trust investigation, I found something strange, a registrar's log. April 12, 2019, 10 days after Shyam's reported death. A man named S. Rawat signed as witness on a land escrow agreement outside Lucknow. The same signature. Same initials. Stamped. Verified. My husband's signature. On a legal document. 10 days after he died. I printed the page. Took it to the district office for confirmation. The clerk shrugged. Name matches. ID matches. Thumbprint matches. I stared at him. Thumbprint? He nodded. We use biometric verification for large transfers now. My breath stopped. Thumbprints don't lie. So either someone used a dead man's finger, or my husband's body was never in that pyre at all. I didn't sleep that night. I pulled out everything I had left from the days after his death. The hospital note. The cremation slip Maya provided. The ashes in the copper urn. The hospital note had no attending physician's name. The cremation slip had a registrar stamp, but no matching entry in the city database. And the ashes? They could have come from anywhere. The next morning, I went to the priest who had blessed the urn. He barely remembered us. You said it was urgent, he muttered. She, Maya, paid for the whole package. Told me he was at peace. Told me not to ask questions. And you didn't? He smiled faintly. When grief walks in, truth walks out. That evening, I called Ria. She hadn't contacted me since the vote. But this time, she answered on the first ring. I told her everything. The signature. The fingerprint. The missing doctor from Bridgelock. The staged funeral. There was a long silence. Then she asked, what if Shyam never died? I didn't respond. She continued. What if they faked it? To protect him. Or to punish him. Or worse, what if they gave him a choice? Disappear. Or watch his family disappear. It was too big. Too wild. But in my gut, something clicked. Because now I remembered, the night before he died, Sham gave me a look, quiet, terrified, final. He had said, if I leave, I hope you'll understand. I thought he meant emotionally. Now I wondered if he meant everything. I told Ria about the man I saw at the vote. Rakesh Handa. His warning. She went silent. I know where Malik was last spotted, she said. A warehouse in Rewari. Off the books. No cameras. But the building's registered to a company called Rawat and Varma Holdings. Rawat. And Varma. My husband. And Maya. That night, I looked at an old photograph. Me. Sham. Arjun. Standing outside the trust building. All of us smiling. A time before signatures meant betrayal, before ledgers burned, before silence became currency. I whispered into the dark, if you're still out there. I'm not angry. I just want to know why you left us behind. It took 3 hours to reach Rewari. Fahim insisted on driving, though his hands trembled every time the road narrowed or a truck passed too close. We didn't speak much. What was there to say? We were chasing a ghost. A name stamped on property records. A whisper from a burned ledger. A man pronounced dead without a body. My husband. The warehouse sat at the edge of the industrial zone, surrounded by silence. Not the usual kind. This was the silence of things not meant to be found. The gate was rusted, but recently oiled. The CCTV cameras were pointed up, disconnected. The lock on the front shutter was old but hung open. Someone wanted it to look abandoned, Fahim muttered. But they checked this place. You can tell. I didn't respond. I walked straight to the door at the far end of the main hall. It was marked with a symbol. Red chalk. 2 intersecting lines. A sideways X. My breath caught. Because I'd seen that symbol before. Years ago, on the back of an envelope Sham once burned before I could read it. I never asked. He never explained. But he'd paused while burning it. He hesitated. I touched the handle. The metal was warm. Inside, the room was clean. No dust. No clutter. A cot. A table. A fan bolted into the wall. And on the table, a photograph, me. Sham. Arjun. Taped to the glass. The corners curled. Worn, like it had been touched often. Then, footsteps. Fahim turned, reaching into his coat, too late. A man stepped into the light from the rear door. He wore a scarf over his face, but I knew. Not by his walk. Not by his clothes. But by the way he looked at me. Like I was both the beginning and the end of something he'd been carrying far too long. I stepped forward. Slowly. Afraid to speak. Afraid he would vanish. Sham. He didn't answer. Just removed the scarf. His hair was whiter. His face thinner. But his eyes? Still mine. I staggered forward, but he raised a hand. Not rejection. Not fear. Warning. Don't, he said. Voice gravel, barely above a whisper. I don't have time. Fahim backed away. I'll give you 2 minutes, he said, stepping outside. 2 minutes. After 4 years. You're alive, I said, because it was the only thing I could say. I had to be, he said. To protect you. From what? He didn't answer. Just looked at the photo on the table. They gave me a choice, he said. Sign everything. Sell out. Or disappear. If I stayed, you and Arjun would have been buried in their mess. So you vanished? He nodded. Maya arranged it. She paid the right men. Malik handled the documents. I left one night through bridge lock side exit. The cremation? Empty casket. Burned with hospital waste. My knees buckled. I leaned against the table. You should have told me. I couldn't. If they knew, you would have been the next accident they arranged. I left the recordings. I left clues. I prayed you'd find the truth when it was safe. It's not safe now, I said. He gave me a sad smile. No. But you're not afraid anymore. That's why you found me. A knock at the outer door. Fahim. Time's up. Sham reached into his coat and handed me a small flash drive. This is the rest of it, he said. Names. Accounts. The man behind Malik. Even Maya's original agreement. He paused. Ria isn't who you think she is. Before I could ask, a second knock. Louder. Urgent. Sham pulled the scarf back over his face. You have to go, he said. I'm not leaving without you. You must. If they find me here, everything ends. You. Arjun, this only works if they think I'm still gone. I stepped toward him. I still love you. He looked at me, the corners of his eyes glassy. I never stopped. Fahim pulled me out as two headlights turned down the road. We didn't look back. That night, I played the contents of the flash drive. Bank accounts. Voice memos. Wire transfers. But one file was different. A final letter. Audio. Sham's voice. If you're hearing this, it means you found me. But that also means they're closer than ever. Don't trust the journalist. Don't stop the audit. And never forget, this wasn't about land. It was about silence. They built an empire on what people were too scared to say out loud. I didn't sleep that night. The flash drive Sham gave me didn't just expose new truths, it unraveled everything I thought I understood. Names I had never seen. Accounts in cities I'd never been to. Connections that reached far beyond our sleepy colony. But one thing stuck out more than the rest, Ria Das's name. Twice. Listed in two separate bank transactions. One as a consultant. The other, marked under a different alias, as a media handler for an entity simply labeled T.R.I. I opened the attached memo. 4 lines. Control the first headline. By the second. If story spreads, discredit source. If that fails, bury it. Literally, if required. Ria wasn't just a journalist. She was an asset. A professional eraser of truths. And we had trusted her with everything. At 6:17 a.m., Fahim called me. You need to come to the community center. Now. When I arrived, he was standing near the notice board. His face was pale. Eyes wide. He pointed to the new poster stapled to the cork. Black border. White font. In memory of Mr. Sham Rawat refuneral and public dedication ceremony Saturday, 5 p.m. I stared at it. Felt the ground shift under me. The family invites friends and residents to honor the true legacy of Mr. Rawat. Arranged with love and respect by Mrs. Maya Varma. Fahim whispered, she's staging a second funeral. For a man she helped disappear? She's turning your truth into a farce. Making it hers. The message was clear, Maya knew I had seen Sham. She knew I had the flash drive. And now, she was going to flip the story, reclaim it, redefine it, and parade it as if the truth had always been hers. She wanted to kill the power of the secret by making it public on her terms. I rushed back home. Locked the doors. Dug through the flash drive again. Buried in the audio files, I found a short clip, dated 2 days before Sham disappeared. Ria's voice. If it leaks, Malik will bury it. That's what he does. Let Maya handle the funeral. Clean. Quiet. One fire ends all stories. So she'd been part of it from the start. Maya arranged the disappearance. Ria scripted the narrative. Malik cleaned up the rest. I forwarded the recording to Fahim. Then I called Arjun. Don't go to the funeral, I said. What? It's not for him. It's for them. To shut us up before we open our mouths. He was quiet for a long time. Then said, what do we do? We burn the last thing they fear. That night, I got a call from an unknown number. But this time, I knew the voice. Malik. I'm impressed, he said. Calm. Controlled. You've stirred more dust than I expected from a woman your age. Still hiding behind others? He chuckled. Why would I hide? I'm calling to offer you peace. One chance. One silence. I'll even let your son walk away untouched. And the cost? The flash drive. I paused. Then asked the question I had been afraid of. Did you kill him? The doctor at Bridgelock. Mara. Silence. Then, everyone has an expiration date. Some just get accelerated. Before he could hang up, I said, I saw Sham. This time, he didn't laugh. You should be careful what ghosts you chase, Maji. Some of them are still on the payroll. He hung up. Which meant Sham's not safe. If Malik knew he was alive, it was only a matter of time. I called Fahim. We released the audio. All of it. Tomorrow morning. Before the funeral. He hesitated. What if they discredit it? What if people think it's fake? Then we give them something they can't fake. Because Sham didn't just give me a flash drive. He gave me something else, too. A second voice memo, unlisted. Untitled. I opened it for the first time. It wasn't to me. It was to Arjun. If you ever hear this, it means your mother succeeded where I failed. It also means you're old enough now to understand what I couldn't say when you were younger. You were never a weapon. You were the reason I chose to disappear. I sent the clip to Arjun. 30 minutes later, he texted back one word, I'm ready. They decorated the community center like a wedding. White canopies. Rows of folding chairs. Garlands of marigold and jasmine. A printed banner at the entrance read, in loving memory of Sham Rawat, a true servant of the people. I stood across the street, under the banyan tree where Sham once waited for Arjun's school bus every afternoon. It was ironic, watching his second funeral staged with such polish, when the first had been nothing more than ash and silence. Maya stood at the podium, dressed in pristine white. Graceful. Grieving. Surrounded by those who didn't know better, and those who pretended not to. The entire community was there. Reporters. Cameras. Trust officials. And most dangerously, Ria. She stood beside Maya, whispering, likely directing the entire charade like she always did. At 4:57 p.m., just 3 minutes before the funeral was scheduled to begin, Arjun arrived. He wore the same navy kurta he'd worn at the first funeral. Except now, he walked without shame. Without fear. He didn't sit. He walked directly to the front. Maya turned, her eyes flickering just for a second. That was her tell. He took the mic. No announcement. No ceremony. Just his voice, firm and low, my name is Arjun Rawat. I am the son of Sham Rawat. And today, I'm not here to grieve. I'm here to end the lie you've all been living inside. Gasps. Murmurs. A few stunned faces began turning toward Maya. Ria stepped forward to intercept him, but Arjun held up a USB stick. This contains my father's final recordings, his real words, not the ones Maya's PR team approved. These clips include confessions, names, and proof of how his identity was forged, how trust funds were rerouted, and how his death was faked with the help of people sitting in this room. He looked straight at Ria, including a journalist who sold her credibility for a contract. Ria's face drained of color. Then Fahim, standing in the crowd, lifted his phone. He was streaming the entire event live on the Trust's public page. Almost instantly, phones came out. Cameras turned. This wasn't a ceremony anymore. It was a reckoning. Arjun pressed play on the first audio clip. Shyam's voice echoed through the speakers. If this is being played publicly, then I've been silenced by force. Maya Verma used my name to authorize illegal property transfers after I refused. My disappearance was arranged. My family was manipulated. Gasps. Two people stood and walked out. Arjun played the second clip. The one where Ria's voice discussed staging the funeral. Let Maya handle the funeral. One fire ends all stories. Now the panic spread. Ria turned to Maya and whispered something sharp. But Maya didn't move. She was cornered. For the first time, she had no narrative to hide behind. Then came the final recording, Shyam's message to Arjun. The one that broke the room in half. You were never a weapon. You were the reason I chose to disappear. By the time the audio ended, at least a dozen people were crying. A few were standing in stunned silence. And Maya? She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She simply walked off the stage, out the side gate. No denial. No apology. Because she knew, there was no cleaning this up. After the crowd dispersed, I approached the podium. Arjun was still there, his hands trembling. You did it, I whispered. No, he said. We did. He handed me the USB and stepped down. I turned to see Ria being cornered by a pair of real reporters now. She wouldn't walk away clean. Not this time. As the sun dipped behind the center, someone lit incense sticks. A breeze stirred the marigolds. And for the first time in 4 years, I felt something I hadn't known how to ask for. Peace. Not because the pain was gone, but because the truth had finally stood tall, unburned, undeniable, and alive. A week after the funeral unraveled into the city's most whispered scandal, the silence returned, but it wasn't the same. This silence wasn't hollow. It was earned. Maya had vanished. Her house emptied overnight. Ria was under formal inquiry. The trust froze 5 accounts linked to the redevelopment scam. Arjun had become a reluctant symbol of redemption, invited, quoted, applauded. But for me, the war wasn't over. Because one piece was still missing. The missing clause in the trust charter. Shyam always said, the most dangerous power is the one no one notices until it's used. He'd helped draft the original residence trust rules, handwritten in their first version, before being digitized. But the modern version, clean, corporate, shiny, was missing something. I only realized it after listening again to the recording where he mentioned, Clause 14b is the one they'll bury first. But when I pulled the digital charter, Clause 14 ended at A. So I went back to where this story had first reawakened. The archive room. Agnes' library. The musty air hadn't changed. The broken ceiling fan still ticked. This time, I didn't go to the filing cabinets. I went to the shelf labeled founding members and local ordinances. And there, wedged inside an old, red-spined copy of Housing Ethics and Colonial Law, was a folded envelope. Inside, a letter. My name on the front, in Shyam's sharp, slanted script. If you're reading this, you've gone further than I ever could. Clause 14b was handwritten on purpose, never typed. Because it gives power to revoke any elected trust authority if they're proven to have misused family estates. It was a safeguard. One no one knows exists except the ones who believe in legacies, not positions. And if you're still fighting, you're the only one who can activate it. He ended with something that broke me more than the day I scattered those ashes. Tell Arjun I forgive him. Tell him I was proud before I vanished, and even more proud after. I took the letter, brought it to the trust office, and demanded access to the original handwritten charter stored in their secure safe. Fahim, now interim chair, unlocked it himself. There it was. Clause 14b. Still intact. Still signed S. That clause, once activated, didn't just strip Maya of her past decisions, it nullified every signature she had authorized in Shyam's name. Land deals. Contracts. Zoning transfers. All of it, voided. The press got wind of it 2 days later. Not from me. From Arjun. He submitted the clause as part of his formal application to reinstate Shyam's original trust policies. Not for power. Not for image. But for his father. That night, I walked alone to the library one last time. Sat in the archive room. Lit a diya. And whispered into the dark, "You didn't fail, Shyam. You planted the seeds. I just had to learn how to grow them." Before we begin this final chapter, I want to thank you for walking every step with me, through grief, truth, betrayal, and fire. If this story has moved you, share it with someone who needs to believe in quiet strength. Like, subscribe, and tell me, where are you listening from? Because stories like this, they're built from places like yours. Now, the end begins. The last message on the recorder wasn't labeled. It was hidden inside a subfolder titled Personal. I almost missed it. When I hit play, I expected another confession, maybe one more strategic breadcrumb from Shyam. Instead, it was his voice. Soft. Familiar. Worn down by time, but still him. This one's just for her. If she ever finds all the others, I want her to find this last. I don't know if I'll still be alive when you hear this, but if I'm not, I need you to know, I didn't leave you. I left the world to protect you from what it had become. Every night I was gone, I imagined your hands still lighting incense. Still stirring sugar into your tea. Still saving the last bite like you always did, just in case I asked for it. If you found me again, you did more than I ever could. But don't come looking anymore. Because if you keep chasing ghosts, you'll forget you're still alive. Let me stay a memory. Because I was never meant to be free. I wept. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just the quiet kind of crying that empties you. The kind where every tear carries a year of silence. Because after everything, after uncovering the truth, after watching Maya fall, after Arjun reclaiming his father's legacy, after holding in my hands the power to bring Shyam back, I understood what he was asking. He wasn't asking for rescue. He was asking for release. That morning, the registrar called. "If you're ready," she said, "we can legally restore Shyam's status as alive in the system." It would mean papers. Hearings. Public noise. Media. It would also mean giving him a name again. But maybe what he left behind, his truth, was more important than his return. I walked to the edge of the colony, where the trees thinned and the fields opened wide. And there, on a stone ledge beneath the neem tree, we had once carved our initials. S+R. I pulled the recorder from my pocket. Held it in my palm. And slowly, buried it in the soil. Not out of fear. Not to forget. But to honor the one request he made with no conditions. Let me stay a memory. In the months that followed, Maya was indicted on 3 counts of electoral fraud and misuse of public trust. Ria Das vanished from journalism circles. Some say she left the country. Arjun now chairs the Residents' Trust, but refuses a salary. Fahim works in the background, finally learning what integrity feels like. And me? I still make tea the same way. I still light incense every evening. And yes, I still save the last bite. Not for a man I lost. But for a man I found again, in every whisper of truth he left behind. Thank you for listening. Tell me, where are you listening from?